All right, so this is my second time trying to do this. The first time my phone crashed in a mysterious way, so it may be that the spirits are hesitant to let me give this review. But at any rate, I just finished reading this book, The Secrets of Solomon, edited and translated by Joseph Peterson, and I felt compelled to talk about it a little bit because it is a really interesting book, particularly if you are a big nerd and enjoy the history of magic. This is a book that you really want to pick up and take a look at because it's fascinating. Just a real quick revelation. I'm a big fan of Joseph Peterson, so obviously, I'm a little bit of a fanboy giving this review rather than a, very intellectual, this is my exuberant enjoyment of this rather than a detailed analysis of the text and so forth. But so anyway, what is this book? Okay, so Joseph Peterson discovered that there is a sort of a proto book to the Grimoire Virum that that contained much more information than is in that book, and that is related to it, but not exactly it. So he discovered that it existed, and he found a bunch of different copies of it, all in Latin, and he went ahead and compiled all of them and translated it into English. The text itself, sorry, the book is backwards here, but because the camera's facing me. But on one side of the page you've got the Latin, and on the other side of the page you've got the English translation that he gave to the book. In terms of the history of magic, this is a really fascinating book because it fills in some gaps, both in terms of what you would practically do with the Grimoire Virum, but also in what you might practically do with the Key of Solomon. There's a lot of experiments that are present in here that you don't see in either of those books, although there's certainly more experiments in Grimoire Virum than there are in the Key of Solomon. Particularly in Mather's version, where he removed several of them that he felt were probably not right. But this has a bunch of different experiments, and a similar kind of a hierarchy of spirits that you find in Grimoire Virum, but it's not the same thing at all. In terms of like looking at the history of how practical magic has been conducted throughout the Middle Ages into the Renaissance, fascinating book, really fascinating. It was owned by a person who was clearly using it practically, and in fact, it was the version that he first found was one that had been obtained in a witch trial. So this was someone who was being tried for witchcraft, and this was the book that they were utilizing for that witchcraft. It's a very well written book. It contains a lot of practical instructions that you don't see a lot of the time, and it is a book that is really got a lot of stuff in it that I haven't seen in a lot of other places. You have a structure that's somewhat similar to the Key of Solomon in some ways, and somewhat similar to the Grimoire Virum in some ways, but it has a lot of other stuff in it that I haven't really seen elsewhere. So, I mean, if you really like to look at historical documents of magic, this is a great book, a book that I totally recommend that you take a look at. Now, in terms of the practical work of magic, there's a lot of stuff in here that I would say you could pull some ideas from that you might be able to utilize, but there's unless you're that particular kind of magician who enjoys torturing and killing small animals and large animals, there's probably a lot of places where you're not going to be able to utilize this book. The ones that jump out at me immediately, there's a love spell that involves utilizing the severed penis of a lion as a significant portion of your work. Now, if you think that it would be in order to get the girl of your dreams, it would be easier to hunt down and cut the penis off of a lion than it would be to, you know, improve your personality, lose weight, or get a better job, or become more charming, whatever you other simpler ways rather than hunting and dismembering lions. I think that, you know, that the practical nature of that particular spell, and a lot of the spells seem to be a little bit missing. For instance, there's another one in which you're supposed to take parchment and cut it into the shape of coins, and actually glue pieces of parchment together until they are not only the exact size of coins, but also the exact thickness of coins, and then you do some sort of ritual, and you keep them and they're going to be traded for actual coins by the spirit that you're working with. Well, in order to even get this parchment, you're supposed to hunt a red deer, and then you skin the deer, remove all of its fur, and then you use lime and turn it into a piece of parchment. Again, the amount of work involved in there seems like it would be, you know, probably easier just to get a job rather than, you know, doing that. But in terms of the ideas in the book and the historical references in the book, is fascinating. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention before I stop this, there's actually quite an interesting reference to elemental magic, the magic of the four elements, which you almost never see in these grimoires. And while it's fairly short and just kind of in passing, I had been talking about how the grimoires don't really mention them too much, and here all of a sudden I found a grimoire that mentions them, you know, fairly distinctly and with a lot of energy, and it describes the different energies that you utilize the entities of the four elements for, largely different kinds of divination. But it's a great book, a fascinating read, and if you're the kind of magician that wants to kill animals, then you're going to have a lot of work to do. And if you're not, you're going to have a lot of thinking to do about how you might go about utilizing some of these ideas without having to do quite so many what would be considered very psychopathic things at this point. So anyway, I do recommend the book, and you should get a copy and read it. It's fascinating. Talk to you later.